Welcome to the Path to Wholeness. The Path to Wholeness is your guide to inner exploration and spiritual growth. I am your host, Bethany Ward, a Jungian-oriented spiritual director and intuitive guide. This podcast delves into the depths of self-discovery, offering insights, wisdom, and contemplative conversations. Today's episode welcomes Katie Wedding. She is a medium, a spiritual companion, and a grief educator. She is also a directee within my private practice. Now, normally I would not invite a directee that I'm in relationship with into this container. I am very intentional about honoring the confidentiality and the director-directee relationship. However, Katie comes with a different perspective, as she is also a spiritual companion. So she is sharing her professional lens as well as her personal lens within this conversation. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Katie, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about you and your work.
Yes. Well, I am, as you said, a medium, a grief educator, and a spiritual companion. My background is in education. I started as a special education teacher and an elementary ed teacher, and then moved on to be a school counselor. And then throughout raising my children, set aside the work life and then fell into mediumship after my mom passed. And so it was mediumship and communicating with past loved ones. That was the path where I met you, Bethany. And then from there, kind of blossomed back into grief education and working with people who have lost a loved one. And then beginning my own journey into being a spiritual companion with others. So that's what brings us here now.
Such rich work, and our work in many ways mirrors each other, which allows us to have more of this peer conversation while being honorous of the relationship that we also have within the spiritual direction container. So we wear many hats together and we walk many miles together. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say about the work. And that's what we're going to be exploring today is the work. What is the art and practice of spiritual direction as it is received by someone? I have shared previously around my experience as the spiritual director, but now we're going to take a look into the experience of someone who is receiving spiritual direction. So I have a few questions, and with your permission, Katie, we'll just dive in. My
Yes.
my first question is, how did you know you were being called into this inner work, into this practice of spiritual direction?
I was in the midst of change. I was at a point in my life where I was beginning to question everything, the way that I had been raised, some of the values, and even just the people that I surrounded myself with. I was just beginning to feel a sense of unease and also a feeling of anticipation that there is more out there and that something else is coming, but just really not knowing. I had tried traditional counseling, especially with my background in counseling. I was very familiar with that route, but I also felt the need to go deeper. And so I think that's when I reached out to begin my own journey into spiritual direction.
Mm-hmm. I think that calling reflects a lot of people who are experiencing that threshold of what was and what might be. And it's a difficult place to articulate. Oftentimes, when I'm inviting conversation around potential directees, they'll use the language you have just used, which is, I feel like there's something more, but I don't know what that is. What is more? What does that even mean? And there's this hunger that's communicated without really a clear understanding of how to satiate that hunger. So,
For sure.
what were your thoughts and feelings when you first acknowledged that call? What was the felt sense of that experience?
Hmm. I was very unsure. I knew that you offered spiritual direction sessions. And I knew that when I worked with you, I felt very safe, and we ended up on a social level having conversations that would go so deep that I thought, I want to explore this further. But when it comes to acknowledging the call of spiritual direction, I think I was actually just very unsure and unclear as to what it was exactly. How did it differentiate from therapeutic counseling? How would it differentiate from meeting with someone from the clergy? And what would I need to do to prepare for it? I think I entered just with a feeling of trust that I was in the right place, but also just very unclear about what it was that I was entering.
It's truly like entering into the mystery,
Mhm.
entering into the nuance of this spiritual direction practice, but also what is going to happen within that
Mhm.
container. I don't have a lot of context for it. And as I've often shared before, it's not like people are talking about spiritual direction around the water cooler.
Yes. Yes.
What did you think it was going to be like? So you said you didn't have any ideas, but
Mhm.
there was still something that you were hoping for. What
Yes. Well,
was that hope?
I was really hoping um that I could begin to have conversations that would uncover the deeper longing in me that it seemed like nothing else was able to touch. I wasn't really looking for solutions anymore. And I was no longer looking for techniques or communication techniques. I was really looking to address the longing within me for something deeper. Um, I wasn't sure what it was going to be like, but I had joined your membership, Bethany, and I knew that you had posted some just some contemplative readings and things that we could do to understand spiritual direction. But when I entered my first session, I felt unprepared. I hadn't done the reading. I hadn't done the homework. I was worried about what I needed to do to prepare. And I think I was thinking that it would be something that I would have to control a lot more and something that I would need to come prepared for. And I very quickly learned in that first session when you said there's really nothing that you need to do to prepare. You just show up and breathe and pause. And just doing that, stopping, asking myself, why am I here in this session that I don't even know what is coming from it? In that silence and in that moment, it just presented itself what it was that at that moment I wanted to talk about. And it
Mm,
became very spirit led.
mm, mm. I love the language that you just used, being spirit led. I hear that a lot in the people I serve when they arrive into session, or even when they begin to arrive into the practice of spiritual direction itself, which is I don't I don't know what to talk about. And I often respond with, that's awesome, because that pushes all of that self consciousness out of the way and allows us to just listen for what emerges. And there's something within your life in this moment that has relevance for us to explore. And don't you know, every single time something emerges, it strikes us both by surprise, it knocks our socks off and amazes us, and it was right where we needed to explore, but neither of us knew that going into the experience. And
Mhm.
I love that quote, that to be spiritual is to be amazed.
Mhm.
And when we
Mhm.
come without agenda into spiritual direction, that is when we are amazed.
Mhm. That is so true. That's definitely been my experience. Yes.
Tell me more about what your experience has been like. So we've explored some of those initial reservations, the initial questions, and the initial longings. But you've been in the container of spiritual direction for quite some time. What's been the evolution of that experience?
Hmm. I am always in awe of how spirit brings forth exactly the thing that I need to address or talk about at exactly the right time. So I always, in a session and after a session, leave feeling very embraced. I feel like I'm sitting in unconditional love. Um, you do such a wonderful job of holding a space for everything. So anything that I'm bringing into a session has importance, even when to me, I don't understand why events or symbols or people keep showing up in my life. To be able to look at it through that lens of awe and understand that things are here for us and that everything is unfolding as a gift, even unpleasant emotions and difficult experiences, to be able to understand that now um, through the lens of it's a gift from our
Mm.
God has been um, just a, it's been a very beautiful experience.
I echo that from receiving spiritual direction myself, but also bearing witness to your unfolding and the unfolding of those I serve. There's a common metaphor and image that is used in the practice of spiritual direction of the three chairs. There's a chair for you, there's a chair for me, and then there's a third chair for the other. And it's like this conversation is happening among the three of us, your God, you, and me. And when we pull up that third chair, we become so aware of our God's participation in our daily life. And we can hear the conversation emerge between the three of us as we continue to explore what is important and relevant to you in this present moment of your life.
Yes, I love that.
What has been the most meaningful for you in this experience overall?
Mm. It opened my eyes, even though I have been raised in a faith my entire life. It actually really opened my eyes to the presence of God in everything.
Mm.
I think that's been the most life-changing part of it for me is to recognize that some of the areas that I'm trying to control, if I can sit back and just allow God to work in that area, things will unfold as they should. So I think that's been the most meaningful lesson for me in all of this.
Mm. Yeah, faith means what you trust. And what I'm
Mhm.
hearing from what you're sharing is that through the presence and the acknowledgement of the presence in our life, we can deepen our trust and allow to the release of some control in our life and just
Yes,
allow the
yes,
unfolding. Like I trust you and I trust you, and I'm using you as a qualifier for the great mystery. I've seen your participation in this experience of spiritual direction. So I'm going to trust you a little bit more today than I was able to yesterday. And that process
yes.
unfolds and unfolds and unfolds, and our faith and our trust deepens and deepens and deepens over time.
Yes, yes, definitely. And the idea that events happen for us rather than to
Mhm.
us has just been
Mhm.
a reframing that's changed the way that I've um, looked at my own life. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that what emerges from us is for us, and
Hmm.
inviting the question around why is this experience necessary?
Hmm.
Not to be reductive and, everything happens for a reason. That's not the question we're asking. But what is this emergence offering you? How is it in service to you? What is your God inviting of you? Why is this necessary? That's a really different form of questioning that leads us deeper into our spiritual experience. Instead of coming up with platitudes, we can instead really engage the question of, well, why is this necessary? What what is being held here for me to view, experience, and grow through?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
So, what has surprised you in this experience?
Mm. I have been so surprised to see that the work really does itself. Um, and that so much of what goes on around us and within us, I think up until that point, I had been ignoring. So much of my experience in spiritual direction is just listening and going within, and to stop pushing away some intuitive nudges or some feelings or just areas that felt uncomfortable. When I actually just sit with it and breathe into it, I recognize that the work is doing itself, and that if I can get curious about things, um, the answers are already there.
Mm. That I really felt it hit to the
Mhm.
heart. One of the things we have to unlearn in the practice of spiritual direction is that we somehow need fixed.
Mhm.
Carl Jung said that individuation was a natural process, it's a natural unfolding. And if we move with the experience of individuation, we come into our wholeness simply by paying attention. And we really have to shake off that there could potentially be anything wrong with us, or that we need to address anything, or we have to keep mining for deeper meaning. If we just allow the soul of who we are space, it will guide us.
Mhm. Yes. And that's really the hardest part, I think, is um, needing someone else to remind you that everything is within and that your guidance is coming from within. So having you point that out to me was so beneficial.
Mm, that's meaningful. How has your spiritual direction experience been different from any other healing modalities that you've experienced?
Mm. One of the things that has been so different is your role, Bethany, as a guide. So I have not really worked with anyone else like you in this type of therapeutic relationship, because there's such an open-hearted invitation to go deeper. And when I try to explain it to other people, I often tell them a session feels um, maybe like a counseling session would feel, but then you're adding another layer on top of it, a transparent layer. But that layer is bringing in spirituality, and it kind of completes the picture. So I think it's different because you hold that space to go even deeper than most of us already go in intimate relationships. I also feel, well, I also know that my spiritual direction sessions involve a lot more of feeling and knowing. Um, it allows the heart to lead, rather than, I think, in other sessions when I'm thinking or using my brain to try to assess a problem or a situation. This just goes straight to the heart. And what are you feeling and thinking? And then validates that as well. And then finally, what I love about it, and I'm speaking this as a former counselor, is that it allows you as the practitioner to bring in so many tools that we don't bring into mainstream therapy. Things like using tarot, or consulting with oracle cards, or considering your astrological chart, and recognizing there are so many of these tools that have been around for thousands of years that have have not been brought into the mainstream, but actually really resonate in such a clear way. So I think that's how it's been different and so beneficial.
Yeah, those tools are these external expressions of what we know to be true. Sometimes the spiritual experience is a wordless experience. It's so hard to grab at the abstractions of what we're trying to express, but you can put an image in front of us and you're like, yes, that is the richness that I am trying to express. And now we're in shared conversation. Oh, yes, I have an appreciation and the same curiosity you're holding around that that image. And as I was listening to you, I was being reminded of a quote that one of my mentors shared with me from Barbara Brown Taylor. And she said, maybe that is the difference between counselors and spiritual directors. We go to counselors when we want help getting out of caves. We go to spiritual directors when we are ready to be led further in.
Oh, I mean, that just, yes, that encapsulates it perfectly. That is the way that I feel about it, that for so long we're trying to get out of the problem, and back to the daylight where we feel safe and comfortable. And in reality, there's so much beauty in the hidden darkness and the parts that we're wanting, the shadows that we're wanting to explore a little bit more within. And I also want to add too, that one of the things I love about the way that your spiritual direction sessions are formatted is that those tools are there, they're available. And if, as I was curious about them, you were able to introduce them. But that in the very beginning, you did not at all rely on those tools and did not bring them into our sessions until we recognized that it might be something that would benefit. So I love the wide array of modalities that you can use to help your directees.
Thank you for lifting that up. And yeah, there is a great intentionality around that is if we go directly to a tool right out the gate, we put too much inherent trust in that
Mhm,
tool itself.
mhm,
The tools are there to serve us and they're in service to the innate and inner wisdom that we already possess. So to be intentional about when does the tool need invitation and when can we actually more deeply rely on what's already there. Sometimes we need a little assistance and a little guidance and we pull a tool forward, but there's already so much richness contained within you that we want to develop trust in from the
mhm,
beginning.
mhm.
So what direct benefits have you experienced in your life as a result of spiritual direction?
The word trust is the perfect example of the biggest benefit I've taken away from these sessions is I have just developed a trust that everything is unfolding as it should, and that I don't need to try to control things because I trust that God is there, and is truly working for me, and that I can sit back and just kind of wonder at how everything happens in my world. So I would say trust is the biggest benefit. And along with that trust, I think that goes hand in hand with releasing control, because I was a person who really felt the need to stay on top of things and control things. And while I'm still a very organized person, I also have come to understand the perspective of there are some things that are not there for me to control. And there are so many um, things in my life that are there for me to allow and to contemplate and to wonder, but not to try to manipulate and change. And so I would say trust is the biggest thing that I have experienced as a result of spiritual direction. And then the second would be just learning to model that deeper wisdom. And so when I'm speaking with others now, um, I can begin to see for others how God is acting in their lives. But I also understand that that's there for them to see. So rather than me revealing that to them, I like being able to model and reflect and help lead others into that deeper wisdom of their own lives.
Mm. Mm. I'm so touched by what you're sharing because often when I'm inviting a new directee into the space, they do want to know about what's the end result. What am I going to get out of this? And it's so difficult to express that one, it is a process, it is a gentle unfolding. And where we orient is going to be a delightful surprise, but also where we arrive and continue to arrive and all of those intervals post is going to be a delightful surprise. We really don't know what is on offer until we begin the process. And so it sounds like you were able to relax into your daily life. And there are other benefits of spiritual direction untold that others may experience, but that was your invitation that you so readily accepted.
I mean, it really has been the biggest, one of the biggest gifts I have given to myself is investing in just this journey and doing that with someone that I trust very much. Um, and knowing that my life just feels more enriched when I take the time to go within and recognize everything that I have in my life, even difficult things that have stepped forward. It's just been life-changing for me to view those as gifts now.
Yeah, it truly is an engagement of fulfillment. What fills my heart? And how do I know? How do I know it's for me? And then how do I dwell within that fulfillment without needing to push it away or condition it in some way? How do I just let myself be in this full heartedness and live my life from it?
Mhm.
Katie, is there anything else that you want to lift up from your experience as a directee?
I think I would just like to speak to anyone that is curious about this, and tell you that your curiosity is your invitation. Even if you're not quite sure what it is that you think that you're curious about, or even if you're just unsure of why you're called to it, know that you are being called. That's what's bringing you here at this point, and that's why you've listened to this whole episode, is because Spirit is putting this here for you as a call to action. And so I think that's my invitation to you now, is to explore that further. And then secondly, to just know that nothing needs to be done. Like, you are perfect as you are, showing up in your imperfect way and knowing that all of that is here for you. And that if you're willing to go deeper, I do love that quote. And if you're willing to go deeper into the cave, there is so much beauty there. Um, and that you possess all of the tools.
Mm, so beautifully expressed. And that invitation is so heartfelt that your curiosity is your invitation. So if you are noticing that you are curious, I invite you to explore my website, BethanySWard.com, to know more about spiritual direction and how I uniquely approach it. Until then, thank you, Katie, for sharing your heart and your wisdom. It was so deeply moving. I very much appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate you as well. Thank
And
you.
as always, thank you for allowing me to walk alongside you.
Thank you.
Be well.
You too.